My name is Beverly, and I'm 29 years old. 3 months ago, I sat in that cold lawyer's office, watching my family laugh as I insisted on claiming my $3 inheritance. While my brothers received millions and my parents got the family mansion, I was left with pocket change that wouldn't even buy a coffee. They called me greedy, pathetic, desperate for fighting over such a meaningless amount, but I knew my grandfather better than any of them ever did. Those $3 weren't just money to me, they were a message, a final gift from the only person who truly understood my worth. I stayed quiet while they mocked me, holding that crumpled bill and sealed envelope close to my chest. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button if you've ever felt underestimated by your own family, and don't forget to subscribe, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about inheritance, family, and the true meaning of wealth. Growing up in the Morrison family meant learning early that love came with conditions, and I never seemed to meet any of them. My father, Richard, owned a successful construction company, while my mother, Gloria, managed their social calendar and charity events with military precision. They had built the perfect American dream in our Connecticut suburb, complete with the white picket fence, manicured lawn, and expectations that could crush a person's spirit. My older brothers, Harold and Eugene, were everything our parents wanted in children. Harold, 34, had followed Dad into construction management and could discuss profit margins over Sunday dinner. Eugene, 32, worked in finance and drove a BMW that cost more than most people's annual salary. They were tall, confident, and carried themselves with the kind of swagger that came from never doubting their place in the world. Then there was me, Beverly, the unexpected third child who arrived 6 years after Eugene, when my parents thought they were done having kids. From my earliest memories, I felt like an intruder in my own home. While my brothers played football and talked business, I preferred reading in quiet corners and asking questions that apparently made adults uncomfortable. Why did we have so much when other families had so little? Why did success always have to be measured in dollars? Why did everyone seem so angry all the time, despite having everything they claimed to want? The only person who never made me feel like a burden was my grandfather, Walter. Every Tuesday after school, I would walk the 4 blocks to his modest apartment above the old pharmacy on Main Street. While my parents saw these visits as babysitting arrangements, Grandpa Walter treated our time together like the most important part of his week. His apartment smelled like coffee and old books, with newspapers stacked neatly on every surface and a chess set permanently positioned on his kitchen table. Walter wasn't wealthy by family standards, living on his pension and Social Security, but he possessed something my parents never seemed to find, despite all their money: contentment. He taught me chess using bottle caps when the regular pieces were too confusing, explaining that every piece had value, even the pawns that everyone else ignored. We would spend hours talking about everything and nothing, with him listening to my school problems as seriously as if I were presenting a business proposal. When I told him about feeling invisible at family dinners, he would nod knowingly and say that sometimes the most important people are the ones others overlook. Walter had worked as a bookkeeper for 40 years, retiring just before I was born. He possessed an old-world wisdom that seemed increasingly rare in our fast-paced family dynamic. While my parents rushed between meetings and social obligations, Walter moved through life with deliberate thoughtfulness, considering his words carefully and treating every interaction as meaningful. During one particularly difficult summer when I was 12, my parents sent me to Walter's every day while they dealt with what they called adult problems. I later learned Harold had been caught cheating on his college entrance exams, requiring expensive lawyers and quiet payoffs to make the scandal disappear. While my parents stressed about their golden child's reputation, Walter and I explored the town library, visited the local museum, and talked about everything except the family drama swirling around us. It was during that summer that Walter made me a promise that would echo in my mind for years afterward. We were sitting on his small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, when he took my hand in his weathered one and said something I would never forget. "Beverly, my dear girl, the world might try to convince you that you're not enough, that you don't matter because you're different from the rest of them, but I want you to remember something very important. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or fancy cars. It's measured in the love we give and receive, the kindness we show to others, and the courage we have to stay true to ourselves, even when everyone else thinks we're wrong. Someday, when I'm not here anymore, I'm going to leave you something that will remind you of your real worth. It might not look like much to other people, but I promise you, it will be the most valuable thing I have to give. I was too young then to understand the full weight of his words, but something in his tone made me pay attention in a way that children rarely do. He wasn't just making conversation or trying to make me feel better about another family disappointment. He was making a solemn promise, and Walter never made promises he couldn't keep. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 3 months ago. I was getting ready for work at the small marketing firm, where I'd been employed since college, when my phone rang with my mother's number. Her voice was strangely flat as she delivered the news that would change everything. "Beverly, your grandfather passed away in his sleep last night. The funeral arrangements are being handled by Morrison & Sons. We'll need you at the lawyer's office Thursday at 2 o'clock for the will reading." No condolences, no acknowledgement that I had just lost the most important person in my life, just logistics delivered with the emotional warmth of a business memo. After she hung up, I sat on my bedroom floor and cried for 3 hours straight, mourning not just Walter's death but the confirmation that my family would never understand what he meant to me. The funeral was a modest affair held at St. Michael's Episcopal Church, the same place where Walter had attended services every Sunday for 30 years. My parents arrived in their black Mercedes, Harold drove his new Lexus, and Eugene pulled up in his BMW, making the modest church parking lot look like a luxury car dealership. They sat in the front pew, wearing appropriate expressions of grief, accepting condolences from Walter's neighbors and friends with practiced solemnity. I sat in the back, holding a single white rose that I had picked from Walter's small garden that morning, listening to Pastor Williams deliver a generic eulogy that could have applied to anyone. He talked about Walter's long life, his service to the community, and his devotion to family, but nothing about the man who taught me chess with bottle caps or promised me something more valuable than money. After the service, my family stood outside the church discussing dinner plans and golf schedules, while I walked alone to Walter's grave. I placed my white rose on the fresh dirt and whispered the words I hadn't been able to say at the funeral. "Thank you for loving me exactly as I am, Grandpa. I promise I won't forget what you taught me about real value." Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth for March in Connecticut. I took the afternoon off from work and drove to the law offices of Peterson, Williams & Associates, a prestigious firm housed in a converted Victorian mansion on the wealthy side of town. The waiting room was all mahogany paneling and leather furniture, designed to impress clients with the kind of old money respectability that my family aspired to. My parents arrived first, followed by Harold and Eugene, both looking like they had come straight from important business meetings. They clustered together near the reception desk, speaking in low voices about estate taxes and investment strategies, already dividing up Walter's assets in their minds. Theodore Peterson was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a three-piece suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He ushered us into a conference room dominated by a massive oak table and began the formal reading with practiced efficiency. "The last will and testament of Walter Eugene Morrison, dated January 15th of this year," he began, adjusting his reading glasses. "To my son Richard Morrison, I leave my personal effects and the sum of $5,000. My father nodded with satisfaction, already calculating how to invest the money. Theodore continued reading, his voice steady and professional. "To my grandson Harold Morrison, I leave my 1987 Chevrolet pickup truck and the sum of $15,000. Harold smiled smugly, probably already planning to sell the old truck and use the money as a down payment on something more impressive. "To my grandson Eugene Morrison, I leave my collection of first edition books and the sum of $15,000. Eugene looked pleased, no doubt mentally cataloging the most valuable titles in Walter's modest library. "And finally," Theodore paused, clearing his throat, "to my granddaughter Beverly Morrison, I leave the sum of $3 and this sealed envelope, to be opened only by her and only in the presence of the executor." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Harold started laughing, a harsh sound that filled the elegant conference room like breaking glass. $3? he gasped between laughs. The old man left her $3? Eugene joined in, slapping his knee as if this was the funniest thing he had ever heard. Maybe he figured that's all she could handle responsibly. My mother shook her head with what looked like embarrassment. Honestly, Beverly, what did you expect? You barely visited him except when you needed something. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I had visited Walter every week until the day he died, sitting with him through doctor's appointments and bringing him groceries when the weather was bad. But correcting their narrative would only make them laugh harder. My father looked across the table with the kind of disappointed expression I had been seeing my entire life. I hope this teaches you something about the consequences of not applying yourself, Beverly. Success rewards those who work for it. Theodore Peterson looked uncomfortable with the family dynamics playing out in his professional office, but he continued with his legal obligations. He produced a crisp $3 bill from an envelope and slid it across the polished table toward me, along with a cream-colored envelope sealed with old-fashioned wax. I want my $3, I said quietly, reaching for both items. This pronouncement caused another explosion of laughter from my brothers. Harold wiped tears from his eyes as he turned to Eugene. Did you hear that? She wants her $3. Oh, this is rich. Greedy until the very end, Eugene added, shaking his head in mock disappointment. Fighting over pocket change, like it's gonna change her life. My mother's voice was sharp with embarrassment. Beverly, you're making a spectacle of yourself. It's $3. Just leave it and let's go to dinner. But I clutched the money, an envelope tightly against my chest, feeling the weight of Walter's promise from all those years ago. These people could laugh all they wanted, but they didn't understand what I understood about my grandfather. Walter never did anything without purpose, and if he left me $3, there was a reason that went far deeper than the number on the bill. I'm taking what's mine, I said, standing up from the conference table with as much dignity as I could manage. Harold looked at me with genuine disgust. You know what, Beverly? This is exactly why you'll never amount to anything. You're so focused on scraping together pennies that you can't see the bigger picture. $3. Can you believe this family? My father stood up as well, his face flushed with what I recognized as the particular anger he reserved for public embarrassments. That's enough, Beverly. You've made your point. Take your money and go home. But as I walked toward the door, still holding my inheritance, I heard my mother say something that stopped me in my tracks. Don't bother coming to Sunday dinner anymore, Beverly. We're tired of your attitude and your constant need to make everything about yourself. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I turned around to face them one last time, seeing my family clearly for perhaps the first time in my 29 years. They weren't just disappointed in me, they actively disliked me. The realization should have been crushing, but instead, it felt strangely liberating. Goodbye, I said simply, and walked out of Peterson, Williams & Associates with my $3 and Walter's final message clutched in my hands. I drove to the parking lot of the old Dairy Queen, where Walter used to take me for ice cream sundaes, needing somewhere quiet and familiar to process what had just happened. The late afternoon sun was filtering through my car windows as I carefully opened the wax-sealed envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of Walter's careful handwriting on cream-colored stationery, along with a small brass key I didn't recognize. His words were written in the same blue ink he always used for his crossword puzzles. My dearest Beverly, if you are reading this letter, it means you had the courage to claim what everyone else saw as worthless. Those $3 represent something far more valuable than money. They represent faith. Faith that I knew what I was doing. Faith that there was meaning in my choices. And faith that you trusted me enough to endure their mockery to honor my final wish. That faith, my dear girl, is about to be rewarded in ways you cannot imagine. Take these $3 to First National Bank on Maple Street. Ask to speak with Joan Patterson in the safe deposit box department. Tell her you are Walter Morrison's granddaughter and show her this money. She will understand. What you discover there is only the beginning, Beverly. I have spent the last 15 years of my life preparing something special for you. Something that will give you the independence and security you deserve. But more importantly, it will prove to you once and for all that your worth was never in question. You were always the most precious thing in my life. The road ahead may seem confusing at first, but trust in the process just as you trusted in the value of $3. Follow each step carefully and remember that every choice I made was designed to protect you and prepare you for the life you deserve. With all my love and faith in your future, Grandpa Walter. I read the letter 3 times before the full meaning began to sink in. Walter hadn't forgotten me or dismissed me with a token gesture. He had created some kind of elaborate plan that started with $3 and a brass key. The key was small and old-fashioned, with numbers etched into the metal. 247. The rain that had been threatening all day finally began to fall as I sat in my car, trying to process the emotional whiplash of the last few hours. My family had essentially disowned me over my insistence on claiming $3, but Walter's letter suggested that those $3 were somehow connected to something much larger. I looked at my watch and realized that First National Bank would be closing in 20 minutes. Whatever Walter had planned, I needed to act quickly if I wanted answers today. I started my car and drove the 10 minutes to Maple Street, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and anxiety. First National Bank was an imposing brick building that had anchored the downtown business district for over a century. I had driven past it thousands of times but never had reason to go inside. The lobby was all marble floors and brass fixtures, designed to convey stability and trustworthiness to generations of depositors. I approached the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair, pulled back in a neat bun. "Excuse me, I need to speak with Joan Patterson in the safe deposit box department. It's about my grandfather, Walter Morrison." Her expression shifted immediately from professional courtesy to something that looked almost like recognition. "Of course, dear. Let me call Mrs. Patterson right away. Please have a seat." Within minutes, a woman in her 50s emerged from a hallway marked Private Banking Services. Joan Patterson had the kind of warm smile that immediately put people at ease, and she approached me with an expression of genuine sympathy. "You must be Beverly," she said, extending her hand. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your grandfather was a wonderful man, and he spoke of you often during his visits here." The fact that Walter had been making regular visits to the bank was news to me. But I followed Mrs. Patterson through a series of security doors to a quiet office overlooking the bank's garden courtyard. "I understand you have something to show me," she said gently, settling behind her desk. I placed the $3 and brass key on her desk, watching her face carefully for any sign of recognition. Her smile widened immediately. "Oh, Beverly, he said you would be brave enough to come. Your grandfather opened a special safe deposit box for you 15 years ago, and he's been adding to it regularly ever since. This key and those $3 are your authorization to access box number 247. My hands were shaking as she led me down a narrow hallway lined with numbered metal doors. Box 247 was near the end, and Joan used both her master key and Walter's brass key to open it. Inside was a metal container about the size of a shoebox, much larger than I had expected. "I'll give you some privacy," Joan said tactfully, guiding me to a small private room with a table and chair. "Take all the time you need." Inside the metal box was another sealed envelope, this one much thicker than the first, along with what appeared to be legal documents, photographs, and a small velvet jewelry box. I opened the second letter first, my hands still trembling with anticipation. "My beloved Beverly, if you are reading this, you have taken the first step on a journey that will change your life forever. What I am about to tell you may shock you, but I need you to understand that everything I did was to protect you and prepare you for this moment. The family you grew up with knows only part of my story. Yes, I worked as a bookkeeper for 40 years, but what they don't know is that I also spent those 40 years building something much larger. Using my skills with numbers and my natural caution, I invested wisely and carefully, creating multiple streams of income that I kept completely separate from the Morrison family finances. Over the decades, I accumulated significant wealth, but I kept it hidden for 2 important reasons. First, I wanted to protect it from your father's business ventures, which I could see were often reckless and poorly planned. Second, I wanted to make sure that when the time came, my true inheritance would go to the person who deserved it most, someone who valued relationships over money, and who would use wealth responsibly. The documents in this box will show you that you are now the sole beneficiary of assets worth approximately $2.3 million, held in accounts and investments under my legal name and social security number. But Beverly, this is still just the beginning. Tomorrow, Take these documents to the law offices of Hamilton, Rodriguez and Klein on State Street in Hartford. Ask to speak with Patricia Hamilton personally, and tell her you are Walter Morrison's granddaughter. She has been managing the larger portion of my estate for the past 5 years, waiting for this day. What she will show you, my dear girl, will prove to you once and for all that you were never the poor relation your family believed you to be. You were always my true heir, the one I trusted to carry on my real legacy. Be strong, be brave, and remember that you earned this through 15 years of love, loyalty, and genuine care for an old man who saw your true worth when no one else would. All my love, Grandpa Walter. I sat in that small bank room for over an hour, reading Walter's letter again and again while examining the documents he had left for me. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, all bearing his name and social security number, but representing wealth I never knew existed. The jewelry box contained a simple gold locket with a picture of the two of us from my 16th birthday, along with a note that said, "Wear this tomorrow when you meet Patricia Hamilton. She'll recognize it." As I drove home that evening, my mind was reeling with questions and possibilities. Walter had created an elaborate mystery designed to reveal itself in stages, each step building on the last. The $3 that my family had mocked were actually the key to accessing millions of dollars in hidden wealth. But more than the money, I was struck by the careful planning and deep love that had gone into Walter's strategy. He had spent 15 years creating a safety net for me, protecting assets from my family's potential greed, while making sure I would be financially secure long after he was gone. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the Tuesday afternoons we had spent together, wondering how many of our conversations had been Walter's way of preparing me for this responsibility. His lessons about chess, about the value of overlooked pieces, about patience and strategic thinking, suddenly took on new meaning. The family that had dismissed me as worthless and greedy had no idea that their $3 joke had just unlocked the first stage of an inheritance that dwarfed anything they had received from Walter's official will. The law offices of Hamilton, Rodriguez and Klein occupied the entire 20th floor of a glass tower in downtown Hartford, with panoramic views of the Connecticut River, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered, rather than shouted about its clients' wealth. I had taken a personal day from work and driven the hour to Hartford, wearing my best business suit and Walter's gold locket, feeling both nervous and excited about what Patricia Hamilton might reveal. The receptionist, a polished young man in an expensive shirt, checked his appointment book twice before looking up with surprise. "Miss Morrison? For Patricia Hamilton? She's been expecting you for quite some time. Please, right this way." Patricia Hamilton's corner office was a study in refined taste, with Persian rugs, antique furniture, and walls lined with leather-bound law books. She was an elegant woman in her early 60s, with silver hair styled in a classic bob and the kind of understated jewelry that suggested old money rather than new wealth. "Beverly Morrison," she said warmly, rising from behind her mahogany desk to shake my hand. "I recognize that locket. Walter showed me pictures of you wearing it. Please, sit down. We have quite a lot to discuss." She settled across from me in a pair of wing-backed chairs, positioned near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. On the coffee table between us was a thick manila folder, with my name written across it in Walter's familiar handwriting. "Your grandfather was one of my most interesting clients," Patricia began, her voice carrying the kind of warmth that suggested genuine affection rather than professional courtesy. "When he first came to me 5 years ago, I thought he was just another retiree looking to organize his modest savings. I had no idea I was about to meet one of the most brilliant financial minds I'd ever encountered." She opened the manila folder and spread several documents across the coffee table. "Walter came to me because he needed help managing what he called his, quote, real estate empire. At first, I thought he was being grandiose about a few rental properties. Then, he showed me his portfolio. The first document she handed me was a property deed for a small apartment building in New Haven. The second was for a duplex in Bridgeport. The third was for a commercial property in Stamford." As Patricia continued placing papers in front of me, I realized that Walter had owned over 20 pieces of real estate across Connecticut, all purchased under his name, using profits from decades of careful investing. But the properties were just one part of his strategy, Patricia continued, producing a thick investment statement. Walter had been putting money into carefully chosen stocks and bonds for over 40 years. He reinvested every dividend, never touched the principal, and made decisions based on research and patience, rather than emotion or speculation. The numbers on the investment statement made my head spin. Walter's portfolio was worth over $8 million, with holdings in everything from blue-chip stocks to municipal bonds to international funds. It was the kind of diversified wealth that financial advisors dreamed of building for their clients over entire careers. How is this possible? I asked, staring at the documents spread across Patricia's coffee table. He lived in a tiny apartment above the pharmacy. He drove a 15-year-old pickup truck. He clipped coupons and shopped at discount stores. Patricia smiled with what looked like admiration. That's exactly how it was possible, Beverly. Walter understood something that most wealthy people never learn. The difference between living wealthy and being wealthy. He chose to live modestly so that he could build something substantial for you. She pulled out another set of documents, these bearing the letterhead of several different banks. Over the past 5 years, Walter transferred ownership of everything to a series of trusts with you as the sole beneficiary. The real estate portfolio generates approximately $60,000 per month in rental income. The investment portfolio has been growing at an average rate of 8% per year. Combined with his other assets, your inheritance is currently valued at just over $12 million. I stared at Patricia Hamilton in complete silence, trying to process what she had just told me. Yesterday, my family had laughed at me for insisting on claiming $3. Today I was learning that those $3 had been the key to accessing wealth that made their inheritances look like pocket change. There's more, Patricia said gently, recognizing that I was struggling to absorb the magnitude of Walter's gift. Walter also established a private foundation in your name, funded with an additional $2 million. He wanted you to have the resources to help other people the way he helped you, particularly young people who might be overlooked or undervalued by their families. She handed me a leather-bound folder containing the foundation documents. The Beverly Morrison Foundation for Educational Opportunity, established to provide scholarships and mentoring for students from non-traditional backgrounds who showed promise but lacked family support. He thought of everything, I whispered, tears beginning to blur my vision. Even a way for me to help other people. Walter spent our monthly meetings talking about you, Patricia said softly. Your kindness, your intelligence, your integrity. He was so proud of the woman you had become, and so angry about the way your family treated you. This inheritance wasn't just about money, Beverly. It was about proving to you, and to them, that your worth was never in question. She reached into her desk drawer and produced one final envelope, this one bearing my name in Walter's handwriting, along with instructions that it should only be opened after Beverly learns the truth about her inheritance. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that made me laugh and cry at the same time. My dearest Beverly, if you are reading this, you now understand that the $3 were never about the money. They were about faith, courage, and the willingness to trust and love, even when the whole world seems to be laughing at you. You have spent your entire life being told that you don't measure up, that you're not smart enough, or successful enough, or worthy enough to matter. Today, I hope you finally understand the truth. You are always the most valuable person in the Morrison family. You just needed the resources to prove it. Use this wealth wisely, my dear girl. Help others who need what you needed. Be generous but not foolish. And remember that the most important inheritance I'm leaving you isn't money at all. It's the knowledge that you are loved, valued, and worthy of every good thing life has to offer. Now go show them what Beverly Morrison is really capable of. With infinite love and pride, Grandpa Walter. I spent another hour in Patricia Hamilton's office, signing documents and learning about the practical aspects of managing my new responsibilities. She recommended a financial advisor, explained the tax implications of my inheritance, and helped me understand the legal structures Walter had created to protect and grow the wealth he had built. As I drove back from Hartford that afternoon, I found myself thinking not about the money, but about the 15 years of love and planning that had gone into Walter's gift. Every Tuesday afternoon we spent together, every chess game with bottle caps, every conversation about the value of overlooked pieces, had been his way of preparing me for this moment. My family had dismissed me as the worthless granddaughter who couldn't even inherit properly. They had no idea that their mockery had been the final test in Walter's elaborate plan to ensure his true inheritance went to the person who deserved it most. The $3 they had laughed about were still in my purse, but now I understood their real value. They weren't pocket change. They were a key that had unlocked a fortune, and more importantly, a grandfather's final message about love, faith, and the courage to claim what rightfully belongs to you. Armed with the full knowledge of Walter's plan and the legal documents proving my inheritance, I knew it was time for the confrontation that would change my family's understanding of everything they thought they knew about the Morrison legacy. Patricia Hamilton had offered to handle the revelation professionally, but I felt that Walter would have wanted me to face them myself, to show them personally what his faith in me had accomplished. I called Theodore Peterson's office and scheduled another appointment, telling his secretary only that I needed to discuss additional aspects of Walter Morrison's estate with the family present. When she asked for more details, I simply said that new information had come to light that would require everyone's attention. The meeting was set for the following Thursday at 2 o'clock, exactly 1 week after the original will reading that had changed my life. I spent the intervening days working with Patricia Hamilton to organize the documentation and prepare for what would undoubtedly be a volatile family meeting. On Thursday morning, I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit that I had purchased with part of my first inheritance disbursement, along with Walter's gold locket prominently displayed at my throat. I arrived at Peterson, Williams & Associates 30 minutes early, carrying a leather briefcase that contained copies of all the relevant documents Patricia had prepared. My family arrived with the same casual arrogance they had displayed the week before, clearly expecting another opportunity to mock my financial situation. Harold was complaining loudly about having to take time off work for what he called Beverly's dramatics, while Eugene wondered aloud whether I was planning to demand a recount of my $3. My parents settled into their chairs with expressions of resigned irritation, apparently viewing this meeting as an unwelcome obligation they needed to endure before getting on with their lives. My mother was already checking her phone for messages, clearly signaling that she considered this a waste of her valuable time. Theodore Peterson entered the conference room accompanied by Patricia Hamilton, whose presence immediately changed the atmosphere from casual mockery to professional attention. Patricia commanded respect in a way that was impossible to ignore, and even Harold straightened up when she was introduced as, quote, additional counsel representing the Morrison estate. Thank you all for coming, Theodore began formally. It has come to our attention that Walter Morrison's estate involves significantly more assets than were addressed in last week's will reading. Ms. Hamilton represents the portion of the estate that Walter managed through separate legal counsel, and she has information that will require your immediate attention. Patricia opened her briefcase and removed several thick folders, arranging them precisely on the conference table. Mr. Morrison maintained 2 distinct sets of assets during his lifetime. The properties and accounts addressed in his will last week represented approximately $50,000 of his total wealth. The remainder of his estate, valued at just over $12 million, was held in separate trusts and investment accounts. The silence that followed was absolute. Harold's mouth actually fell open, while Eugene looked like he had been struck by lightning. My parents stared at Patricia, as if she had announced that Walter had secretly been an alien visitor from another planet. That's impossible, my father said finally, his voice hoarse with shock. Dad lived in a tiny apartment. He drove an old truck. He never had any money. Patricia smiled with professional composure. Mr. Morrison was extraordinarily skilled at living below his means while building wealth through careful investment and real estate acquisition. Over the course of 40 years, he accumulated a portfolio that most professional investors would envy. She opened the first folder and began placing documents on the table. 23 rental properties throughout Connecticut, generating approximately $60,000 per month in income. A diversified investment portfolio worth $8.2 million. Business interests in several small companies, and a $2 million charitable foundation. Harold found his voice first, though it came out as more of a croak. Where did this money go? Who inherited it? Patricia looked directly at me with what I recognized as barely contained satisfaction. The entirety of Walter Morrison's real estate and investment portfolio was left to his granddaughter, Beverly Morrison, along with full control of the Beverly Morrison Foundation for Educational Opportunity. The explosion that followed was everything I had expected and more. Harold slammed his hand on the conference table so hard that Theodore Peterson's coffee cup jumped. That's impossible! She got $3. $3! Eugene was shaking his head frantically, as if he could make Patricia's words untrue through sheer force of denial. There has to be a mistake. Beverly doesn't know anything about money or business. Dad wouldn't have left her millions of dollars. My mother's face had gone completely white, and she was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before, Something between shock and what looked almost like fear. Beverly, did you know about this? Have you been lying to us about your grandfather's money? For the first time since entering the conference room, I spoke up. My voice calm and steady, in a way that surprised even me. I knew exactly as much as Grandpa Walter wanted me to know, when he wanted me to know it. The $3 you all laughed about were the key to accessing everything else. He designed it that way to see who would have faith in his decisions, even when they seemed meaningless to everyone else. Harold was looking at the documents Patricia had spread across the table, as if they might burst into flames. This can't be legal. There has to be a way to contest this. Beverly can't inherit millions of dollars. She doesn't even have a real job. Patricia's voice carried the kind of authority that came from 30 years of estate law practice. I can assure you that every aspect of Walter Morrison's estate planning was completely legal and properly executed. Beverly Morrison is the sole beneficiary of assets that were accumulated over 4 decades and transferred into her name through a series of irrevocable trusts. There is no legal basis for contesting these arrangements. My father was staring at me with an expression of complete bewilderment, as if he were seeing me for the first time. Beverly, what are you going to do with all this money? You don't know anything about managing investments or rental properties? Actually, I said, opening my own briefcase and removing the foundation documents Walter had prepared, Grandpa Walter spent 15 years teaching me exactly what I needed to know. Every Tuesday afternoon we spent together was preparation for this responsibility. Every chess game, every conversation about strategy and patience, every lesson about seeing value where others see worthlessness. I placed the foundation paperwork in front of them, watching their faces as they realized the full scope of Walter's planning. The Beverly Morrison Foundation will provide scholarships and mentoring for young people who are overlooked or undervalued by their families, students who show promise but lack support, who need someone to believe in their potential the way Grandpa Walter believed in mine. Eugene was reading through the investment statements with the kind of desperate attention of someone hoping to find a mathematical error that would make everything add up differently. Beverly, this is insane. You can't possibly manage $12 million. You'll lose everything within a year. That's where you're wrong, I said quietly, producing the business cards Patricia had given me for the financial advisors and property managers who had been working with Walter for years. I have an entire team of professionals who have been managing these assets successfully for decades. My job isn't to do everything myself, it's to make wise decisions about how to use the wealth Grandpa Walter created. Harold had moved past denial into what looked like rage. This is exactly why Dad was losing his mind at the end. Beverly, you manipulated a sick old man into changing his will. You took advantage of his dementia, or whatever was wrong with him. Patricia Hamilton's voice cut through his accusations like a blade. Mr. Morrison was evaluated by 2 independent physicians within 6 months of his death and found to be completely competent. His estate planning decisions were made over a period of 15 years, with regular updates and revisions that demonstrate clear intent and sound judgment. Any attempt to suggest otherwise would be both legally frivolous and personally insulting to a man who clearly understood exactly what he was doing. The room fell silent again as the reality of the situation began to sink in. My family had spent a week celebrating their inheritances and mocking my $3, only to discover that they had received the leftovers while I had inherited the feast. My mother finally found her voice, though it sounded strained and unfamiliar. Beverly, honey, maybe we were too hasty last week. Family disagreements happen, but we can work through this. Why don't you come to Sunday dinner this week so we can talk about how to handle all this responsibly? I looked at her for a long moment, recognizing the calculated sweetness in her tone, the same voice she used when she wanted something from her wealthy friends. Mom, last week you told me not to bother coming to Sunday dinner anymore because you were tired of my attitude. You said it was time I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. Well, it turns out I can stand just fine. Harold was frantically scribbling numbers on a legal pad, apparently trying to calculate how much of my inheritance he thought he deserved. Beverly, we're family. Surely you're not going to keep all this money to yourself when you know Eugene and I could help you invest it properly. You're right that we're family, I said, standing up and closing my briefcase. But Grandpa Walter understood something about our family that took me 29 years to learn. He knew that some people love you for who you are, and other people only love you for what you can give them. The $3 were his way of showing me the difference. I walked toward the conference room door, then turned back to face them one last time. For 15 years, I visited Grandpa Walter every Tuesday afternoon because I loved spending time with him. I helped him with groceries and doctor's appointments because he needed help, not because I expected anything in return. I listened to his stories and played chess with him because those moments mattered to me, not because I was planning some elaborate inheritance scheme. Eugene was still staring at the investment documents as if he could will them to change. Beverly, you have to understand. This changes everything. We need to figure out how to handle this as a family. No, I said firmly, my hand on the door handle. This changes everything for me. For you, nothing changes at all. You got exactly what Grandpa Walter thought you deserved, and so did I. The only difference is that he understood my value better than any of you ever did. As I walked out of Peterson Williams & Associates for the second time in a week, I heard Harold shouting something about family loyalty and shared responsibility, but his words faded into background noise. I had spent my entire life listening to my family tell me what I was worth, and it had taken Walter's elaborate gift to show me that their assessment had been completely wrong. The $3 were still in my wallet, and I planned to keep them there forever as a reminder of the day I learned the difference between being valued and being valuable, between being loved and being needed, between having a family and being truly seen by the people who matter most. 6 months have passed since the day my world changed forever, and I'm writing this story from the sunroom of the house I purchased in the same Connecticut town where I grew up, close enough to my old life to remember where I came from, but far enough away to build something entirely new. The house itself is nothing like the ostentatious mansion where I spent my childhood. It's a comfortable colonial with a wraparound porch, a library that reminds me of Walter's apartment, and a garden where I grow the white roses I place on his grave every Tuesday. It's the kind of home that feels peaceful rather than impressive, welcoming rather than intimidating. Managing Walter's legacy has become my full-time job, though it feels more like a calling than work. Patricia Hamilton introduced me to the team of professionals who had been helping Walter for years. Property managers who handle the rental buildings, financial advisors who oversee the investment portfolio, and accountants who ensure that everything remains legal and properly documented. The Beverly Morrison Foundation has already awarded its first round of scholarships to 12 high school students whose families either couldn't or wouldn't support their educational dreams. Each recipient receives not just financial assistance but also mentoring and guidance from successful professionals who understand what it means to succeed despite family obstacles. One of our first scholarship recipients, a brilliant girl named Sarah, whose parents dismissed her scientific interests as unfeminine, reminded me so much of myself at 17 that I cried during her interview. She's now studying biochemistry at Yale with full support from the foundation, and she sends me progress reports that make Walter's spirit feel very much alive. The rental properties continue to generate steady income that supports both my comfortable lifestyle and the foundation's expanding programs. Walter had chosen each building carefully, focusing on affordable housing in decent neighborhoods where working families could live with dignity. I've maintained his approach, viewing the properties as community investments rather than profit maximization opportunities. My relationship with my biological family has evolved into something I can best describe as cordial distance. Harold and Eugene both called within a month of learning about my inheritance, offering their services as financial advisors who could help me manage my wealth more effectively. When I politely declined their assistance, they seemed genuinely baffled that I would prefer working with established professionals rather than trusting my fortune to their guidance. My parents have made several attempts to rebuild our relationship, inviting me to holiday dinners and family gatherings with the kind of persistent enthusiasm they never showed when I was just Beverly the disappointment. Their sudden interest in my company feels hollow after 29 years of indifference, but I've chosen to respond with polite courtesy rather than anger or resentment. The truth is that Walter's gift gave me something more valuable than money, the freedom to choose my relationships based on genuine affection rather than family obligation. I no longer need my parents' approval or my brother's acceptance because I finally understand my own worth. That knowledge has liberated me from the exhausting cycle of trying to earn love from people who were never capable of giving it freely. I've built new relationships with people who see me as I actually am, rather than as a reflection of their own expectations or disappointments. My property manager, Joan, has become a dear friend who shares my love of gardening and mystery novels. Patricia Hamilton and I have lunch once a month to discuss both business and life, and her mentorship has helped me grow into the role Walter envisioned for me. The Foundation's advisory board includes several other scholarship recipients from previous decades, people who overcame family obstacles to build successful careers, and who now want to help others do the same. Our monthly meetings feel like family dinners, with the warmth and support that I always wished for but never experienced growing up. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had walked away from those $3. If I had been too embarrassed by my family's laughter to claim what Walter left for me. The thought sends a chill through me, because I realize how close I came to missing not just the money, but the message. That I was worthy of love, investment, and faith from someone who truly knew me. Walter's chess lessons have taken on new meaning as I navigate the complexities of wealth and responsibility. Every decision requires the same patience and strategic thinking he taught me, with bottle caps on his kitchen table. Every choice about investments or foundation grants requires me to think several moves ahead, considering not just immediate outcomes, but long-term consequences. The $3 remain in my wallet, carried in the same small compartment where I keep Walter's photograph. Occasionally, when I'm making a particularly difficult decision about money or relationships, I take them out and remember the courage it took to claim them in the face of my family's ridicule. They remind me that value isn't determined by other people's opinions, but by the faith and love of those who truly see us. Last month, I received a letter from a foundation scholarship recipient who graduated from medical school and is now beginning her residency in pediatric surgery. She wrote that our support had not only made her education possible, but had also shown her that someone believed in her potential when her own family saw only wasted effort. Reading her words, I felt Walter's presence so strongly that I had to sit down and catch my breath. This is his real legacy, not the money or the properties, or even the foundation, but the ripple effect of believing in people who have been overlooked or undervalued. Every scholarship we award, every life we touch, every dream we help make possible, is Walter's way of continuing to love and protect long after his physical presence is gone. I think about him every day, especially on Tuesday afternoons when I visit his grave with fresh white roses and updates about the foundation's work. I tell him about the students we're helping, the properties we're maintaining, and the life I'm building with the gift he gave me. Sometimes I imagine I can hear his voice in the wind, reminding me that the most important inheritance isn't money at all, but the knowledge that we are loved exactly as we are. The Beverly Morrison, who sat in that lawyer's office 6 months ago, clutching $3 while her family laughed, feels like a different person entirely. That woman was still seeking approval from people who were incapable of giving it, still measuring her worth by their standards, still believing that love had to be earned through achievement or compliance. The woman I am today understands that Walter's love was never conditional on anything I accomplished or achieved. He loved me for my kindness, my curiosity, my willingness to see value in overlooked things, and my capacity to care about others even when I felt unloved myself. Those qualities were always there. I just needed someone to see them clearly enough to reflect them back to me. Have you ever had someone in your life who saw your true worth when everyone else overlooked it? Someone who believed in your potential even when you couldn't see it yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, because I think we all need reminders that we matter more than we sometimes believe. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear Walter's message about the difference between being valued and being valuable. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places and discovering that our worth was never in question. We just needed the right person to help us see it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most precious gifts come in the smallest packages, wrapped in the faith of someone who loves us exactly as we are. May you find your own Walter Morrison, and may you have the courage to claim your $3 when the moment comes. Until next time, this is Beverly, reminding you that you are worthy of every good thing life has to offer, even when the whole world seems to be laughing at your dreams.